Hey, this is Scott with Fig Tree Ministries. This video is going to be the final in a series of videos on God's holidays or God's appointed feasts. In our last video, the Festival of Tabernacles, we explored how scholars arrive at the idea that Jesus' birth was most likely during this final fall festival. So using clues from Luke, we arrive at a birth sometime in the fall, most likely the Festival of Tabernacles, and not on December 25th, which we've been celebrating since 336 AD. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at where this December 25 date comes from. Now we're also going to look at a pagan god whose birth is placed at December 25, and this happened to be the fastest growing religious cult in the Roman Empire during the time of Jesus and the early church. The god is called Mithras. So we're going to explore the origins of this pagan god, and we're going to take a look at how our God used a pagan mathematician to create a crisis in the cosmos that would have people looking for a God that was bigger than, outside the cosmos itself. So when the gospel went out into the world, people were primed to hear a message about a God outside the cosmos who would enter into the chaos of the human condition in order to effect salvation. Enjoy this teaching on December 25 and the god Mithras.
Just so you know, and I said this, but for the audience, it's going to be a wild ride this morning. Sit back. There's a lot of information. I understand that you won't capture it all. We're probably at some point going to have to review this because it actually connects to Mark. I'll show you that in the end. Yes, so if you think, what on earth is he talking about? Well, we don't normally go this far out on a Sunday morning, but today we will. Because it's so cool what God did to prime the Roman Empire, or the Greek-speaking people, Greek or Latin and Greek. He primed them so that when his son showed up, they were ready, already looking for something similar. So that when the gospel went out into that world, it spread like wildfire. And it's of course, it's all the Holy Spirit, but God set them up. And it's so cool how he used a pagan mathematician to do that. We asked this question a couple years ago. Why was it that God sent his son at that moment in time? Why not 200 years earlier? If this is all about the salvation of the world, get on with it, God. Why wait so long? What was it about that moment in time that when his son showed up, everybody, or many people, I won't say everybody, said, I got it. Yeah, I mean, there's Old Testament prophecy, no doubt, but this is going to be part of it for the pagan world to actually see what's happening with Jesus. We're asking the question, where did we get December 25? Why do we celebrate Christmas on that day? We finished last week with that question. And so we'll go into that today. We were going through these 7 holidays. These are the biblical holidays. And we finished last week with this one on the bottom called the Festival of Tabernacles. That's what started last Sunday night. And it should be ending tomorrow because it's an 8-day festival. And what we noted was that that's most likely where scholars place the birth of Jesus. During the Festival of Tabernacles, sometime September to October. Now, why? And this is what we walked through all last week. Remember, it's holy speculation. We don't know. The Bible doesn't give us the date. So we're just simply speculating on the holy to say what little nuggets, what can we follow in the text that would lead us to, or lead scholars to think it's sometime in the fall. So it all comes out of Luke. So Luke begins his story, his gospel, by telling the story of John the Baptist. the birth of John the Baptist. And he mentions his father, Zechariah, was in the priestly division of Abijah. Now, to a modern Christian, that means 0. And so you just quickly get to the next sentence that sounds more familiar, because we get uncomfortable when we don't know what the heck Abijah is. Well, that's one of the priestly divisions, and we know that they stayed on a calendar of the priestly service in the temple. So if we can follow the priestly service, and we can tell when Abijah shows up in the temple, you can say, aha, Zechariah was in the temple sometime around end of May, beginning of June. Which means Elizabeth gets pregnant sometime around the beginning of July. Now you start counting months, because Luke starts telling us that she stayed in seclusion for 5 months. In her 6th month, Mary got pregnant, right? So then you get Mary's pregnancy, which would place Mary pregnant sometime around December, beginning of January. And if you add 9 months to the beginning of January, you end up end of September, October. Which actually then, if we go back to that holiday, the Festival of Tabernacles, the shout, the cry from the crowd was Hoshana, save now. That's what they're crying out to God for. And God says, okay, here's my salvation, Yeshua, Jesus, into the world. And it would be so cool, just like God, to show up on the holiday when everyone's crying for salvation. He says, okay, here's my salvation, which is what the word Jesus means, God's salvation. That is a coordinated God. And that tells you God's in control of all these events in time. You don't have to worry. So walk in peace today. Why worry? So that leads us, of course, to this question. Why December 25? Where do we get that from? Yeah, it was a pagan holiday. Now, this is not controversial. It's just that a lot of people don't know it. It's not like scholars can't figure it out. It's just that most Christians don't know. The very first recorded celebration of Christmas, the holiday that we know, Christmas, is not until 336 AD, 300 years after Jesus. Now, there are groups of Christians, particularly, the pagans love to celebrate the birth of their God. But the Bible doesn't tell us to do that. So as the pagans come into Christianity, they bring with them their traditions. And there were a number of groups that had birthdays set up throughout the year, but no one really knows the answer. But the very first recorded one that we have is until 300 years after Jesus. And the reason that this becomes significant is because a few years earlier, the emperor of the Roman Empire, Constantine, became a Christian. Suddenly, it was in to be a Christian because he was attempting to unify the Roman Empire with one religion. So it makes sense that out of that suddenly comes the recognition of the birth of the Savior. Now, here's the thing, though. What were they celebrating? What was that Roman holiday? Well, it's a holiday it's a term, Sol Invictus, which means the victory of the sun, or the victorious sun. And that's the holiday that they celebrated on December 25th. Now, I want to take you back a little bit and say, how did we end up with that date? How did the Romans end up with the victory of the sun on that date? Yeah, it goes back to when is that winter solstice as the sun appears to be dying and then suddenly comes back to life. Have you heard of this? Okay. I'm going to go back about 3,000 years of religious history before Jesus. The idea of a resurrection, the fact that people would die and come back to life, has been around as long as religions have been around. The Sadducees are the ones that are out of sorts. The Sadducees said there was no resurrection. They're tending to follow I think some of the Greek philosophies that filtered in, there were certain Greek philosophies that said there's no such thing as a resurrection. It's all over when you die. And the people hated that. Because, you mean I got to live this miserable, suffering life? And this hard work, and maybe I'm a slave, and this is all I got? So resurrection was a powerful idea to say, no, there's hope for the future. But it's been around. Let me show you why. They don't get it because the Bible tells them that. They get it by observing the cosmos around them. And they say, what else do we see that dies and resurrects every year? Well, the first one is plants. So if you were simply a very, very ancient religious person, and all you knew was the cosmos around you, what would you notice about plants? They die and come back to life every year, right? At one point, the plants are living in the summer, and they're producing fruit. And suddenly, they go into a cycle where they begin to suffer. And eventually, they die. But you notice that the cosmos built itself so that whatever died comes back to life. And you say, well, of course, if the cosmos was built that everything would die and resurrect, then why would it be different than me? We see human beings die. We see human beings come into the world. We don't really fully understand why. So to the ancient mind, resurrection is you're just following the cosmos, nature. You'll see why this is important in a minute. Okay, so trees. Trees is one. What about the moon? Every 30 days, the moon dies and then resurrects. So the moon will be at a full moon over here. And then they notice that the moon begins to go into a phase of dying. It swings down until eventually the moon's gone. And what they noted was that the moon, this period where the moon goes away, was 3 days. Have you heard of this? So 3 days gets associated with resurrection. What day does God create plants on when He's creating the world? The third day. So the very thing that dies and resurrects every year was created on the third day. The moon dies and goes away for 3 days. There's something about the number 3 built into the cosmos. Now, the thing about Jesus is He did resurrect. That's the powerful thing. Is we saw Him resurrect. That's why Paul says, if there's no resurrection, what the heck are we doing here? We saw Him. And they were so passionate about having seen Jesus because it meant that the resurrection that everybody was hoping for is real. And the people loved it. Okay, plants, moon, last one. And this is where we get to the soul, Invictus, the victory of the sun. The sun itself goes through a cycle, doesn't it? So somewhere around June 21st, the sun is at its highest point in the sky. And then it begins a slow descent down to December 21st, December 22nd, wherever that falls that year, where it appears the sun is dying. Only to what happens next? It begins to go back up, and they say, yes, the sun is victorious. It overpowered death. And so they celebrate the victory of the sun 3 days later, December 25. So once you see, it's all, they don't have a sacred book. God's not revealing this to them. They're simply, God placed in all human beings the desire for eternity. Put that on our heart. From Adam and Eve. So we're all searching for that, whether we know God specifically or not. Okay. So what happens is, this is called Sol Invictus, the victory of the sun. It's actually, this is the longer name, Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the victorious sun. Now, if your whole nation becomes Christian and you suddenly recognize, oh, that's the sun that was resurrected, what do you do with this holiday? You switch it. And you say, well, we're not going to worship this anymore. We're going to worship the true unconquered Son. So all they did was said, we've got this holiday. Let's now switch it to our Lord Jesus. And that's what happens. You just switch that over. Because then you realize, oh no, that's the true Son that was victorious. All right, now, the whole point is the victory, this Sol Invictus holiday, there's a god that became associated with that Roman holiday. And this is what I want to show you today, which gets to be a little bit of a wild ride. The god is right here. I'm going to guess you probably haven't heard of this god. His name is Mithra. Has anybody heard of Mithra? Okay, yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to exclude anybody. Mithra is his name. It's a long, complicated, how did we get up to Mithra? But I want to show you at least where it starts to get. This is the fastest growing religion at the time of Jesus and the early church. The church fathers have more to say against Mithra than any of the other gods. Dionysus, Artemis. It's all about Mithra. It becomes the fastest growing. What you see here, let me back up one, and we'll see this picture throughout. This is called a tauroctony. A tauroctony explains the backstory. It's a mystery religion, so they don't have a book that tells you how do you worship this god. They just have thousands of artifacts, and I'll show you a map of all the worship sites where you worship this god. But you notice he's slaying a bull. If we could expand this and look at the whole picture, it's all zodiac. It's symbols of the stars. And so you could see right away, they're telling a story of something that's happening up there in the cosmos. And Mithra is killing a bull. By the way, does anyone know what this little cap is called? It's called a Phrygian cap. Phrygian, Phrygian. Phrygian. And the Phrygian cap is associated with wisdom. The Phrygians were a people group. Laodicea and Colossae is in Phrygian, is in Turkey. It's a people group. Now, you know where else you find a Phrygian cap? Look at the shield of the United States Senate, and you'll find a Phrygian cap hanging there. The Army's shield has a Phrygian cap on it. Papa Smurf wears a Phrygian cap. You know the little Smurf cap? That's a Phrygian cap. The place that you worship Mithra is called a Mithraeum. That's what this word is. It's a cave-like structure. They're all set up similarly. And this is a map. This is not all the Mithraeum that they found, but can you see how many Mithraeum there were? They're everywhere. Now, let me just orient you on the map. Here's the Mediterranean Sea right here. This is Africa to the south. We go all the way to the north where England is. And notice it follows the Roman Empire. Here's the other thing. There's a Mithraeum at Caesarea in Israel. The Roman soldiers put a place to worship their god, and archaeologists discovered this Mithraeum maybe 50 years ago in Caesarea. Also, look at where Rome is. Yeah, I tried to get Bonnie. She went to Rome. Well, she was on a cruise years ago, and they had one day in Rome. And I kept trying to convince her, look, you got to go. It's called the Basilica of San Clemente, or the San Clemente Basilica. It's a Catholic basilica. You go 5 layers down to the very basement of the Catholic Church, and there's a Mithraeum. They just built the church right on top of the worship site. And I kept saying to Bonnie, go check out, I want you to get a picture of this Mithraeum for me. She's like, I got one day in Rome. You want me to go there? No way. I'm going to see the Vatican. I'm going to whatever. So I couldn't convince her to go. But anyways, yes, so you could go to Rome today, go down to the basement of the basilica, and you'll be sitting in a Mithraeum. This is everywhere. Very, very popular, particularly with Roman soldiers, because Mithra is a big, strong god who slays a bull. And what do we want to be? Big, strong man that, slay the bull. Okay. The other place, those of you who do travel to London, or if you have been, Hadrian's Wall, which is the Roman wall that borders Great Britain to the south and Scotland to the north, they found a Mithraeum along that Hadrian's Wall. Why? Because that's where all the soldiers are hanging out. They got to worship their god. Okay, anyways, that god, Mithra, becomes associated with the soul Invictus. He becomes representative of the sun, the unconquerable sun. Now, this is the coolest part of the whole lesson. If there's anything you remember, it's this right here. God created a crisis in the cosmos about 100 years before Jesus showed up, so that when Jesus shows up, the people are primed to look for a God that's bigger than the cosmos. Because something shifted. Okay? Now, it all started, and this is so cool because God loves to use pagan people to do stuff. He starts with a Greek mathematician named Hipparchus. Hipparchus, if I understand, is the father of trigonometry. He's a Greek mathematician, and he's studying the cosmos, and he realizes something shifted. Now, their idea of the cosmos is that when you look up at the stars in the sky, that they thought that was fixed, and it rotated around the Earth. So that every year, it's the same rotation. And his discovery was, it's not the same rotation. And that threw a wrench into the system, so to speak. So you have a Greek mathematician named Hipparchus, and we'll talk through what he discovered, that there's actually, the Earth has a little bit of a wobble as it spins, and that wobble means that the stars are slowly moving across the sky from their what the ancients thought was a fixed position. Hipparchus makes a discovery. There's a disorder in the chaos, and they begin to search for a God that's bigger than the cosmos. Do you know of a God who's bigger than the cosmos? And what they come up with is Mithra. This religion suddenly comes on the scene in a full force about the time Jesus is born and throughout the early church. And of course, this is him right there. Now, what's going on? What actually happened? As I mentioned, they pictured the cosmos, the stars, that this was a fixed, like a solid structure that the stars sat on. And then that big circle rotated around the Earth. And in between those stars way out here and the Earth here were 7 objects, 7 stars that maneuvered independently. The Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus. Thank you. So John, who's in Turkey, he writes in the book of Revelation, the one who holds the 7 stars, in his right hand. Who holds the 7 stars? Because the 7 stars are the key to get to heaven, which is this field of stars. They believed that when the soul lifted off the earth, it would become one of the stars in the Milky Way. So when Paul writes, you will shine like the stars, something like that, it's not just empty. They go, okay, I know what he's talking about. Because that's part of their theology, was to make it to the stars. But to make it to the stars, you had to go through the 7 bodies. Who can get you past the 7 bodies? John writes, Jesus holds the 7 stars. And all over Turkey, Even mosques will have 7 stars on their towers. It goes way back to this idea that there were 7 bodies that you had to move past to get to heaven. Now, what happened then? What happened with these cosmos? It all has to do with the idea of March 21st. So March 21st is what we call the vernal equinox. It's the day when day and night are perfectly the same period of time. And the question, the way they would look at this, and this is where the zodiac comes in, is they said, what zodiac sign? What sign, if we all went out to on this coming March 21st, we all got together at like 4 a.m. and we met up on Mount Laguna. And we're all looking to the east, and we're looking for what zodiac sign is right above the horizon as the sun is about to rise into that sign. I'll show you a picture in a minute. Where does the sun rise into on March 21st? And that told them the cosmos is in order. Okay, so in Jesus' day, the sign was Aries. So they're looking for because if the sun every March 21st passes through the same sign, it tells you there's order in the cosmos. It's what you want more than anything in the world because life is chaotic. They're looking for order, aren't we? Yeah, we're still looking for order. Listen to all the politicians as we go into the silly season. I will fix everything that's chaotic in your life. That's the promise. But can they? No, because the common denominator in your life is you. So Jesus says, before you point out the problem in someone else's eyes, look in your own eye, right? If we're going to find peace in this world, it's discovered within, not as we're trying to solve all the problems. Okay, so March 21st. So this is how it kind of looked. Oh, let me show you this. Here's the zodiac, and I put the picture of the zodiac on your... We're going to look at these 4 signs. There's Taurus, that's the bull. The next is Aries. And in Jesus' day, the sun rose into Aries on March 21st. So this picture of the zodiac still reflects the ancient idea. March 21st, the sun rises into Aries. Then we're going to look at Pisces as well. All right, why? So if this is the night sky, and I know that's like looking at an eye chart in the doctor's office, March 21st, here's Taurus, there's Aries, there's Pisces. In Jesus' day, you go up to the top of the mountain, you look on the horizon on March 21st, and you see Aries, and the sun rises through Aries, and you say, yes, the cosmos is still in order. Now there's a problem. They thought this was fixed, that it always rose on March 21st into Aries. Well, guess what Hipparchus discovered? It's not fixed. Because the earth wobbles, these signs shift. And so today, you can see the year 2000 is right here. So today, if we walk out to Mount Laguna on March 21st, and we look for where the sun is rising, it rises into Pisces. Meaning that fixed globe shifted. Does this make sense? Now, just so you know, today we're almost out of Pisces. This has been going on for 2,000 years. We're almost done with Pisces. We're almost moving into the next age. We're in the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That was a beautiful segue. So Hipparchus, this is what Hipparchus discovered, that the equinox, so March 21st is the equinox, the stars process, they don't stand still. And that meant that there was something bigger than the cosmos moving it. Who has the power to move those stars? Right, and so that's what they're searching for, is a God who's big and powerful that can switch the stars. So this is what he discovered. Brilliant. How do you figure that out in 150 BC or whenever he did? Trigonometry. Okay, so check this out. They thought this was fixed. So in their day, Aries, 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 every March 21st, every March 21st. Until Hipparchus said, sorry, they're shifting, right? So today we get Pisces, and exactly your segue, we're almost in the age of Aquarius. We're shifting about another 100 years, and we're going to be in the age of Aquarius. Now, there's not a defined line, but the age of Aquarius is supposed to be a period of peace. We might call it the age of the Messiah. The history of Mithra, they didn't quite make him up. He's a very old god from Persia, but they adopted him into this new religion. Okay, now, if we're in the age of the dawning of the age of Aquarius, like the song by the Fifth Dimension, just so we give them credit for the song, that what Hipparchus, the way he realized this was he studied the very old religions from 2500 BC. And what he found was they were looking at Taurus. That at one point, the ancient religions said March 21st is when the sun rises in Taurus. That's how he figured it out. He said, wait a minute, if they used to worship here, but we're looking at it here, then something shifted. So who has the power to kill Taurus? Mithra. Yeah, okay, by the way, it takes 21, that's obviously probably a guesstimate, 2,150 years for each sign. So we've gone through about 2,000 years of Pisces. And there had been 2,000 years of Aries before that. That's why they thought nothing changed. Because for 2,000 years, they hadn't seen any change. He's a Greek mathematician named Hipparchus. All he did was the calculations, and he also, I'll show you it's really cool. I'll show you an ancient temple where you can clearly see there's something happening in Taurus. Well, because they thought it was fixed forever. And if there's a shift, that means there's a god bigger than the cosmos. See, all their gods, Zeus, Hermes, Dionysus, they all lived within the cosmos. They weren't outside of it. They were in the cosmos. So if something is bigger than the cosmos, we need to look for that god. Okay, so today, this is for today, right? On March 21st, the sun is rising. Here's Pisces. And then Aquarius is right there. And you can see we're not that far from leaving Pisces and moving into Aquarius. Because slowly but surely, those stars are shifting. So he discovers the precession of the equinox and realized that at one point on March 21st, the sun rose into the house of Taurus. So when you depict your god, I don't know which one's next. Okay. I've kind of gone a little bit ahead of myself, but as I stated, who's bigger than the cosmos, right? Who was able to pull Taurus out of his spot? And of course, that's him right there. So why do they have the slaying of the bull? Because he had the power to move Taurus out of his location on the stars or on the calendar. That's where they come up with this. And if we pulled this out, what you would see are all the constellations surrounding Taurus. And you notice you have a dog attacking him. That's the Canis constellations. And this thing called the Tauroctony, you find it in all of the Mithraeums. There's an interesting book. It's very old called The Witness of the Stars. And the guy talks about how they built the story of the zodiac in the sky. And it actually is quite representative of the story of Jesus. Plus, what's really interesting about it is each star, let's say there's a star in a constellation, all the people groups, Persia, the Sumerians or the Babylonians, the Egyptians, they all look at the same star and they name it a similar name. Like, that's a coincidence, unless it's not, because God is active in the world whether they know it or not. Okay, So let me just take you real quick, and I want to show you a temple, very old temple. There's a city in Turkey that Paul goes to called Antioch of Pisidia. Paul ends up going there. He preaches a couple times in the synagogue. The people love it, but the Jewish leaders get jealous. Have you ever heard of this? A religious leader gets jealous and then gets mad at Paul, right? He's popular, and suddenly the religious leader isn't, which is the same thing that happened to Jesus, and they kick Paul out. Antioch of Pisidia sits in the middle of nowhere. It was a Roman colony. They were trying to subdue the people groups in Turkey, like we're trying to do in Afghanistan. You're never going to get those tribal people to settle down. So you set up colonies and you simply try to influence them through being there. So on top of this mountain, right next to Antioch of Pisidia, is this building right here. Now this is a very old temple to a god called Men-Eskenu. So this is his Men-Eskenu, and it's from about 2500 BC. That's the time when Taurus was on March 21st. And so if you notice, I'll show you a better picture, but what they engraved on these rocks looks like a house, right? Because they talk about the stars as a house. The sun is rising in the house of Aries. The sun is rising in the house of Taurus. The Magi saw a star in the house of Judah. And what zodiac sign represents Judah? Leo. So the Magi saw a star in Leo, the house of Judah, and they moved. He said a king's going to be born. So what does this little guy look like inside of there? A bull. So this is a house, and then each house has a bull. Well, what zodiac sign is the bull? Taurus. So apparently, according to these worshippers of Men-Eskenu, something happened while Taurus was in the house that the sun rises into. Very old. Then it went away. The religion died. Eventually, they turned this temple. Now you get to the 1st century, and they make it a Mithraeum. So you have a temple to Men-Eskenu, and inside of that is a Mithraeum. Because the same people were trying to figure out the same issues. So that you can actually go. You have to walk up the hill, which isn't fun. But you can go there and actually see that old temple. So that represents the house of Taurus. So there he is. Now, this is what's so cool. God creates a crisis, meaning the people suddenly realize there's a bigger God than what we thought. So Hipparchus makes a discovery. In that, people go, wait a minute, now there's a disorder. The early Christians, all those gods that we know, the Greek gods, they were dying out at the time. But what was rising? Mithra in its place. So they're looking for a God that's bigger than the cosmos. Now let me show you 2 things before we finish. The first one is this. There's a city in Turkey that became it was the epicenter of all Mithra worship, like the Vatican is to the Catholic Church. If you say, where's the central city for the Catholic Church? It's in Rome, it's the Vatican. Well, here's Israel down here, of course. That's Jerusalem and Israel. Rome is over here, and this city right here is called Tarsus. You know anybody who grew up in Tarsus? Now, wouldn't it be just like God that he picks an apostle to go bring the good news to the world that not only is steeped in Judaism, because this is where his family grew up, but he spent his schooling years in Jerusalem. But wouldn't it be cool that God picked somebody that not only was learned under Gamaliel in Jerusalem and could speak Bible, fluently, but also grew up in the city where was the birthplace of Mithra in a sense. So he knew all the stuff about Mithra. Yeah, it is cool how God, again, is God coordinated? Of course he is. This is not an issue. Yeah, so that's the epicenter of Mithra worship is Tarsus. And of course, that's where Paul's from. Now, let me show you the last thing, and don't turn there, but I put these down because we're running out of time, but if Mark is writing to people in Rome, do they know Mithra? Yes. And Mithra was this god who was outside the cosmos, who could come in and mess with the cosmos. So Mark starts his gospel like this. And the heavens were ripped open on Jesus' baptism. And the Spirit enters into our world from outside. So there is a God that can enter into the cosmos or enter into our world. So that's how Mark starts his gospel. How does he end the gospel? Yes, the temple veil. Thank you. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. It was ripped open. And guess what was depicted, according to Josephus, which is in that book over there? According to Josephus, guess what was depicted on that veil? The universe, the cosmos. No, but Josephus gives a description of the temple veil, and he describes it as representation. Now, what he says is they left out the signs. They left out the zodiac signs, but the way they depicted the temple veil is the picture of the cosmos, and God is beyond the cosmos. He's in the temple or the Holy of Holies, but he's beyond the cosmos. That's what it represented. So it would make sense that if the cosmos were ripped open in the beginning, and then at the end, ripped open again in this representation, that now God can move back out. You could see if you're a Roman citizen who knows Mithra and you hear Mark, you're hearing something that we don't understand. We're not, because it tells you there's a God outside the cosmos who wants to enter into our chaos. And not just so I can show you how powerful I am, but so that I can bring the love of God into the world. So, in a sense, the soul Invictus is Jesus. He's the unconquerable Son. Okay. I told you that was going to be a wild ride. It's just one other example of how coordinated God is about moving the world to be ready to hear about his Son. And hopefully I enlightened a little bit about this Mithra. It's cool. Yes. We do know the story that's told about that, how he saw a vision of a cross in the sky, and there is the story about Constantine. I know Constantine's father, whose name was, and I can't remember, he was called Mithra incarnate. Chloris was Constantine's father, and they have coins that show Mithra, the light of the world, and Chloris said, "That's me. I'm God incarnate." You know, by the way, when God creates the universe, he has a heavenly council, right? And then he creates Israel, and how many tribes does he put around him? 12. So just like God in the cosmos is surrounded by some kind of number 12, now the problem with the zodiac is when you begin to worship it. When you begin to say, the zodiac's going to tell my future, that's where you go into problems. Not that God created the stars or that you could tell a story from them, but when you begin to worship the stars rather than the God that created the stars. Yes, that's where we go wrong.
This is Scott with Fig Tree Ministries. We hope you were impacted by this video and that the video helps you understand just how amazing our God is and how he set up the world to be looking for a God bigger than the cosmos, who had the power to enter in and bring salvation to the human condition. Fig Tree Ministries is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We operate solely on the generous financial donations of our supporters. If you've been impacted by these videos, we would ask that you would prayerfully consider providing financial support to Fig Tree Ministries. You can make your donation directly to the ministry through the donate page at figtreeteaching.com. Our prayer is that the more you learn about the world of the Bible, that you'll be able to see the text with new eyes, and that you would be able to gaze just a bit deeper into the wonders of God's Word. For more teachings that explore the biblical text, check out our website, figtreeteaching.com.